you describe that demoralization of the understanding of masculinity, and then how that affected the ongoing relationship in the history after that between men and women?
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you asked. That's a good question. So it was in the night. Today we're used to the double standard, right? We're kind of used to the idea that, like in a dating relationship, it's a woman who's supposed to hold the line. I asked my students if that's still the case, but yeah, definitely. And I saw a questionnaire recently that's two of the questions were: women are more pure than men, and women are more morally sensitive, I think is the way they put it, than men. And I thought, you even got those questions in a questionnaire? And this just popped up recently, through Twitter or some social media, some questionnaire. Anyway, where did we get the double standard? I was shocked to discover how recent that is. That's the 19th century. Before that, men were thought to be morally superior. Mm-hmm. Since the time of the ancient Greeks, the insight between right and wrong was thought to be a rational insight. And since men are more rational, were thought to be more rational, therefore men were more moral. And so from the time of the ancients, people thought men were the ones who were more masculine, more moral, more spiritual. In fact, the word virtue, do you know the Latin root of virtue? The word virtue? V-I-R? Mm-hmm. It's Latin for man. Mm-hmm. Virtue comes from the word man. And so it originally had connotations of manly strength and honor. It's like the word virile, V-I-R, mm-hmm. virile. So yeah, virtue was not a feminine quality. It was thought to be a masculine quality. And this all changed after the Industrial Revolution, because as men went out to the workplace, to offices and factories, which were becoming secularized, many people thought that their men were becoming, like you said, more sort of aggressive, competitive, and taking on traits that were not suitable for coming. When they came home at night, these were not the traits that you want as a husband and father. And so for the first time ever in human history, women began to be said to be the more moral, more spiritually sensitive than men. This was completely new. This had never happened before in all of human history. That because the public realm was supposed to be value-free, values had to be cultivated in the private realm, at home, in church. And who's at home? Women. So women were, in a sense, tasked with being the moral guardians of society. And when the men came home at night, they were supposed to reform and remoralize their men. Yeah. Men were supposed to come home and be reformed by their morally superior wives. And so that became the it's sometimes called the doctrine of separate spheres. Men work in one sphere, the public sphere, and then they come home at night, and the women have to, teach them again how to be moral and gentle and so on with their family. But notice what's happening. And I should add, we talked about the reform movements. Sorry. I'm not sure what this is. I think maybe an allergy happened because I was up all night coughing.
That's fine.
So we might want to cut this part. I've not been having this. It just started last night. We talked about the reform movements of the 19th century. Well, most of them were led by women. And so there was a kind of a male-female dimension there too, that women were leading the reform against what I said were traditionally male vices. So again, women were seen as the moral reformers of society. Well, but what did that mean for men? That meant men were being let off the hook. Mm-hmm. If you're tasking women with being the moral guardians of society, then what are you saying about men? You're essentially saying they are no longer to be trusted to be moral leaders in the home and in society. There's one historian. There are not very many books on the history of masculinity, by the way. This is another reason that my book has a lot of material that nobody knows. They don't know about that sociological literature I talked about earlier, but they don't know this history either, because because of feminism, we have whole libraries of books about women and women's history. I found like a smattering of books about men and the history of masculinity. And so one of my books was it repeatedly used the phrase, it was letting men off the hook.
Yeah.
You know, the more you treated women as morally superior, the more you let men off the hook. And so the reform movements, for example, like the temperance movement was largely women. Well, it's churches and women. It was led by churches and women. But the illustrations of the day, I found several of them. It's fun to, by the way, the book has several historical illustrations to kind of bring this to life, which helps. But I found several illustrations of the temperance movement where it's women standing outside the saloon, you know, demanding that their men come back home, you know, to the family hearth where they belong, and stop spending the family money on alcohol. And the illustrations would show the women praying, and then it'd show the men in the saloon with their arms crossed, you know, looking angry and hostile. But what was that saying? That was saying that it's up to women to moralize men, and that men are not naturally moral. That, like I said earlier, men are more naturally prone to sin and vice, especially when it comes to things like sex and alcohol. So that's what I meant by the demoralization of the masculine character. The ideal for masculinity was losing its moral character, losing the idea that no, men are called and equipped to be the moral leaders both in the home and in the broader society.
Yeah,